You saw earlier some of the gaps in K through 12. We're going to focus now on the ways in which that K through 12 system and the gaps that emerge in the K through 12 system can compound and exacerbate throughout post-secondary institutions. So first, a little bit about Carolina demography, because we've been doing some really exciting work with the John M. Belk Endowment, the community colleges, and a few other organizations like My Future MC over the past few years to really try to help leaders around the state answer the question, what is the impact of demographic change on where is North Carolina headed with respect to that? So we're generally looking at population level changes and how those intersect and shape other challenges that are going on in our communities. We are not primary collectors of data, but we do analyze a lot of data. Most of our work is done around either identifying the right data to answer the questions that we have, integrating data sets to answer those questions, and then kind of talking publicly about the data that we're analyzing and trying to be very transparent about methods and what we are finding and communicating that in an accessible way. So getting out of what is often called the ivory tower of academia and actually talking in plain language and not using terms like heterogeneity and heteroscedasticity, because we're all on the same page about what those mean, right? So what we're going to do today is look at some data that are based on analyses we did for the My Future North Carolina Commission. And what we're using, we're going to be using some data from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. We're looking at adjusted cohort graduation rates, so that's 4-year graduation rates from high school, as well as what I have found to be a fantastic resource, which are high school graduate intentions. Now, we all know intentions and actions are not the same thing, right? I intend to go to the gym, I intend to eat more vegetables. Whether I actually do those things are somewhat of a different matter, but they do give us a clear sense about expectations and understanding of students as they're leaving high school. And finally, and most exciting, we actually have the opportunity to analyze almost 760,000 high school graduates with 4.5 million unique post-secondary enrollment records using data from the National Student Clearinghouse. So we're going to be actually sharing data that's based on the actual post-secondary outcomes of 2009 through 2011 North Carolina public high school graduates. So all of this, these are actual outcomes that are underpinning the data that I'm going to show you today. And what we're going to walk through is what right now our high school to post-secondary pipeline looks like in the state. Understanding that when we're talking about education, this is a lifelong process. The high school through post-secondary is not the only part of that process, but it's the one where our systems have the most immediate impact and potential to really affect change. We're going to look at an imaginary group of 100 ninth graders and what would happen to those ninth graders today if they were exposed to how we know students have been historically moving through the system and the most recent knowledge that we have about how those students move. So for every 100 North Carolina ninth graders, and there are many groups of 100 because it's right now about 120,000 ninth graders in the state public education system. 86 of them will graduate high school on time. So 4 years later, we're going to have 14 are dropping out or taking more than 4 years, and 86 are in college. So the spring intent, I don't know what quite happened with my slides here, but we're going to ignore it because the data is unaffected. So in the spring, they are asked about what they plan to do. And of those 86, one says, I don't really know. My husband says, that was me. He's like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And he actually enlisted in the military, but his dad said, you can't go to the Marine Corps, you're going to go to school. You're going to go to post-secondary, and pulled him out and sent him to community college. Or said, I want to go to the military. In our military communities, like Cumberland County or Onslow County, this is a much higher percentage of students because students have expectations that mirror the community around them. They have expectations that align with what they see as the appropriate pathway through this post-secondary system. Another 10 say, I'm not really sure, but I'm going to go work. So what we have is of those students, we have 15 with non-post-secondary intentions, and we have 71 who explicitly say, I want to continue my education. And keep in mind, this is a survey that the schools are giving their students in part because they're asking them, where do I send your transcripts when you graduate so that you can enroll in the fall? Of those, 28 say that they want to continue their education at one of the great institutions in the UNC system across the state. One more, 29, say that they want to go to one of the state's 58 community colleges. And 14 say that they are planning on going either to a private institution that's in-state or to an institution that is out of state, whether a public or a private institution. Again, they're intending this, but intentions and expectations do not, and actual behavior do not always align. There's a phenomenon that we often refer to known as summer melt, which is the difference between students who have actually applied and been accepted in the spring of graduation and then the number that show up in the fall and actually matriculate into post-secondary. When we look at who actually enrolls immediately in the fall, we see there's a very large gap. So whereas 28 intended UNC, 22 showed up. 29 intended the community colleges and 15 enrolled. This is going to be, that gap between intentions and actual enrollment is going to close over the next kind of 12 to 18 months because many of the students who begin at community colleges do have some delay after graduation. But that's a different question than what we're tracking right now. I do want to point out though that the community colleges are serving a very different student pathway than our four-year institutions are. And then there's a pretty strong coherence between the students who say that they intend to go to a private institution or out of state and those who actually enroll, about 14 versus 12, in part because that student profile is a radically different student profile than the larger group of students that's being served by our in-state public institutions. So getting into college is great, but the benefit of college is in the degree or credential that you earn afterwards. And we know that students getting into college is just the first step in a process that takes multiple years. So when we look at how many students return, we have 22 that said that they're interested in going, 49 who immediately enrolled, and 22 who did not. And of those 49, 9 do not come back their second year. They're not in any institution. Another 5 actually changed schools between their first and second year of enrollment. And when we look at those students, the students who are able to change schools, this is a little bit of that idea of like you have access to credit. You have some benefit that allows you to continue on your post-secondary career, even though the first place that you went might not have been the best fit. Right? So these students actually tend to have pretty good overall outcomes because they were able to make a transition to a better fit institution for them. After that first year, they didn't quite work out so well. And so that's called persistence because they're staying at the exact same school, but they're staying somewhere. They're staying in the education pipeline. And if we go out 6 years, now we're going to start looking at how many students who began on time actually complete a degree in a timely fashion within 6 years of graduation. And what we see is that of those students, 49, we have 15 who returned for a second year of school that did not complete a degree or credential within 6 years. So out of those 100 ninth graders, 10 years later, we have 25 degrees or credentials. We have 24 who might be what we would call partway home students, who have some college but no degree or credential to go along with what's often going to be a debt burden associated with attending post-secondary. Some of those are individuals who may have had one semester under their belt and then found academic barriers. Others may have been for a few years and had financial barriers or medical issues. And one of the, UNC actually did a great study on partway home students about 2 years ago, and one of the things that they found was there are a number of students who are kind of have been blocked. They've gotten almost everything they need for a degree and they can't pass their capstone class. And so they may be 10 or 20 credits shy of their degree and they are not able to get it. So there's kind of a whole host of potential barriers. We also have 22 who intended to go to college but did not make an immediate transition, 15 who went to work with the military, another 14 who dropped out or delayed from high school. And now very briefly, I do want to show, because we've just gone through this equity walk, how these outcomes vary across racial and ethnic groups. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because James and I are going to sit down and facilitate some conversation, but know that if you do want to look at this data in depth, we're happy to share the materials and the slides with you. So this is the overall outcome. And this is a very quick, this looks a little bit like Tetris, but we're going to step through it. How this looks by race and ethnicity. So when we look at high school dropouts, we have all students and then it's alphabetically ordered, American, Indian, Asian, Black, Hispanic or Latino, and white. You can see that while the state average is 14, this ranges from just 6 high school dropouts for every 100 ninth graders for our Asian students to 20 for our Hispanic or Latino students. Next, when we look at where students intend to go after graduation, for every 100 ninth graders, 15 intend military or work after graduation, but that rises to 24 among our American Indian students, 20 among our Latino students. And this is in part because these students are much more likely to be potential first-generation college students. So they don't have parents who are necessarily going to be able to help guide them on the path to post-secondary. When we look at those who report intentions to continue their education but don't transition immediately, statewide that's a number of 22. That number is 30 among our Hispanic students. So for every 100 ninth graders, 30 Hispanic ninth graders report intentions to continue their education but do not transition immediately to post-secondary programs. Then we look at partway home, so students who began post-secondary but don't complete a degree in a timely fashion. The highest number there is 24 overall for every 100. Among our Black students, that's 28. Meaning that this is a group that is very likely to enroll in college, but is possibly facing greater barriers continuing for a whole host of reasons, possibly related to many of those non-cognitive challenges or barriers that were mentioned earlier. And last, when you look at what we call post-secondary success, I think it's important to point out that our Asian students have the highest success rate. 41 of every 100 Asian ninth graders graduate high school on time, immediately transition to post-secondary, and complete a degree in a timely fashion. That's still less than 50%. And still 41% of our Asian students successfully complete the post-secondary pipeline in a timely fashion. And what's important to point out here is that success masks a lot of challenges that can occur along the way, but are often overcome by family resources or kind of mentorship resources that may not be easily visible. And James and I had a great conversation leading up to doing this presentation. And what struck me was when you are maybe buffered from some of the consequences of bad outcomes in your own life by your privileged position, it's easy to forget that they happen. And when I thought about it, 5 of the 6 people closest to me have had things that could have derailed them from post-secondary success, but were buffered by access to family resources. My sister dropped out of high school and got a GED. She's a master's in speech and language therapy now. You know, both of my sisters had to stop college and move back home for a while because they were struggling. My mom almost dropped out of college for financial barriers, but happened to mention it to the right person who could connect her to resources. That's either luck or just, luck to be born to the right family, luck to mention your problem to the right person. And what James and I would like to facilitate now is how can we make these outcomes not about luck, but about a system that encourages equality of outcome for all students, regardless of whether they're lucky enough to be born to a family with resources or not. So thank you very much, and look forward to our conversation.